In the next video, I'm going to show you how to do very stretchy or elasticy bind-offs in case you're doing toe-up socks and you get to the cuff and you're ready to bind off and you want something that's super stretchy and elastic and will give you the flexibility to pull it up your leg. What I've done here is I've just done a 2x2 rib and I've put markers every 10 stitches. So I will show you 5 different kinds of bind-offs on this one sample. We're going to start with the elastic, then Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, then an icord bind off, then a picot bind off, and an invisible rib. And on a separate piece of knitting, I'm going to show you how to do a tubular bind off, which is also a very stretchy, amazing bind off. So like I said, I'm going to start with the elastic bind off, and this is probably the easiest I find out of all of them, and it's fairly easy to remember and to use for pretty much anything that you want. I use it for all my bind-offs basically, but it's you can use it for socks or shirt sleeves if you're working top down and you want to have a loose sleeve. It's just a great easy bind-off. So you can either knit or purl. I'm just going to knit the first 2 stitches and I'm doubling my other colored yarn just so that it's the same weight as the gray. So you knit 2 stitches and then you bring them back to your left hand needle and you knit through the back loop. And now I've got 1 on my right hand side, so I knit another one. I now have 2 on my left hand side. I bring them both back to my left needle and I knit through the back loop. And I do that all the way across until I finish all my stitches. So this is the elastic, it's just plain elastic bind off. It's simple and quick to remember, and it's got some nice elasticity to it. And there we go. When I finish it, when I get to my last one, I just come here, cut my yarn, and thread it through my last stitch. And there we go. There's this one. The next bind off I'm going to show you is Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. This is an amazing bind off and it's pretty good and solid. It's got a lot of elasticity and it's also fairly simple. It's just a yarn over between each stitch you knit and then you bind off. The only tricky part of this is knowing how to wrap the yarn over before you either knit or purl the stitches. So like you noticed in this first bind off, I knitted all my stitches across. Here I'm going to knit my knits and purl my purls. So it's a good bind off to do if you have 1 knit, 1 purl, 2 knits, 2 purls, or 3 knits, 1 purl, whatever kind of rib you have. It's a really nice bind off. So we're going to start by wrapping our yarn around our needle, and we want to wrap it from the top around and finishing back down towards the back. So I have this loop in front of me. Okay, and I start and I knit that first stitch. And then I bring that yarn over I created over that first stitch I knit. I have another knit stitch. So again, I'm going to want to come around over the top of the needle and finish in the back, creating that loop. And then I knit 1 stitch and I bring my yarn over that first stitch. And now that I have 2, I still need to get rid of that first one. So I'm just going to bring that first stitch over the second stitch. Now I'm ready to do a purl. So for the knit, I was coming over the needle around and finishing in the back. For the purl, I'm going to do just the opposite. I'm going to come between the needles, forward, and then wrap around and come back forward. So I have the loop facing the other way. I'm finishing with my yarn forward. which is what you need when you purl. And so then I purl that stitch. I bring my yarn over that stitch I purled. And again, I have 2 stitches, so I'm going to bring that first one over the second one. Again, my next stitch is a purl. So I'm going to yarn over the needle, around the back, finishing in the front. And I purl that stitch. And I have my yarn over my other stitch. I can just go ahead and grab both of them. Seeing they both need to go over that first stitch and just take them off. My next stitch is a knit. So I need to bring my yarn to the back first, wrap it around my needle and finish off in the back so that I can knit that next stitch. And I end up with my yarn over, my second stitch, well, my first stitch, my yarn over, and then the one I just knit. And I'm just going to bring those over and take it back. Again, wrap my yarn around, knit one, bring them both over. I have purl, so I bring my yarn forward, wrap it around, purl the stitch. I bring both of these over. And again, I'm just doubling my yarn, my yellow, so it's the same thickness as my gray. But you would only have 3 strands here, you wouldn't have 6. So each one of those, each 2 strands counts as 1. I hope that's not confusing you. And then I come to work my knit stitches. Bring those 2 over. And then when you get to the end, you just, oops, I'm missing one of my strands. So what do I do if I've made a mistake and I'm missing a strand? I can just take out my needle and pull this. You'll see the one stitch that was there. I can just go ahead and pick it up. And then I can pick this one up. And I'm back to wrapping my yarn around, doing my yarn over, knitting my stitch, and bringing, oops, I split my yarn. And then I bring these 2 over. And then that's it. You cut your working yarn and you thread it through. And so there we go. There's the Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. Okay. The next bind off I'm going to show you is the icord bind off. It's really nice. It's stretchy like these, but it's got more of a rope look, and it's a nice decorative edge. It does use up more yarn than these 2 bind offs, so if you're running low, maybe it's not the ideal bind off for you. We're going to start by casting on 3 stitches. I'm going to knit them on. So I start with 1. Now most of the icord bind offs are with casting on 3 stitches and working with 3 stitches all the way. You could choose to do more and it would give you a bigger, thicker icord bind off. Okay, so I've added my 3 stitches here. I'm going to knit my first 2. And then I'm going to do an SSK between my first one I increased, I cast it on, and then my first one for my work. So the way I do SSK is I slip knitwise, I slip purlwise, and then I knit through the back loop of those 2 stitches. Now I'm going to slip these 3 stitches back to my left needle. And I repeat that again. I knit 2, and then I do an SSK between that stitch and the one for my work. Slip knitwise, slip purlwise, and then knit through the back loop. And pass these 3 stitches to my left needle. Again, knit 2, SSK, and bring my stitches back to the left. Knit 2, SSK, and bring them back. I'm going to do that all the way until I have 3 stitches left over here, and I will show you why. So I've got 3 more stitches to consume. With the icord bind off, you want to finish off the end nicely. You don't just want to cut the string and pull it through the loop, because there isn't one loop. There's going to be 3 loops, and it's just going to look weird. So what you want to do is you want to do a small Kitchener on the last 3 stitches, which is kind of cute. So I am, oh, I have 1 more stitch to go. So 1, 2, SSK, and then I'm not even going to bring them back. So this is what my icord is looking like so far. It's like a rope all the way around. Okay, so I finished my icord bind off. I've got the 3 stitches that I was working on, and then my last 3 stitches that I have left over from my original work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn my right needle behind my left needle so that it's parallel to it, and bring my working yarn to the back of that. And that'll bring me my 3 stitches from both the ones I haven't worked and the ones I've been working with. And I'm just going to Kitchener these together. So I'm going to cut my working yarn and put a darning needle. And then I'm ready to do my Kitchener. So if you want to, I have a video on the Kitchener. The front is, we do the setup row purl, and the back is knit. And then the front stitch is knit, slip it off, purl. And on the back row, I'm going to purl, slip it off, knit, front needle, knit, slip, purl, and back needle, purl, slip, knit. And I'm left with a knit stitch, and I take it off, and a purl stitch, and I take it off. And there is my icord bind off finished. So that's the 3 so far. The next bind off I'm going to show you is a picot bind off. It's also elastic, and it's got a nice decorative edge. So let's start. We knit 2 stitches and cast one off as we would normally. So knit 1, 2, and to cast off normally we just bring that first stitch over the second one. Now I'm going to turn my work and look at the wrong side of my work, and I'm going to cast on with a knitted cast on 3 stitches. So I come in here and just cast on 3 stitches. That's 1, 2, and 3. I turn my work around again so that I'm facing the right side of my work. So now what I see is my original stitch plus the 3 I cast it on. Well, I'm just going to bring over the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stitch. I'm going to bring them all over that 1st stitch. And now I'm going to do 2 bind off stitches. So I knit 1 and I bind it off, and I knit 2 and I bind it off. So now I have 1 stitch again. I turn my work around and I cast on. I do with a knitted cast on, I do 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. I turn my work around, and again facing the right side of my work, I take off that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stitch over that 1st, and I do 2 bind offs. This is a very pretty cast bind off, but it does use up quite a fair bit of yarn. Again, so if you're low on your yarn, I would probably not do this one. And again, I turn my work around and I cast on 3. Split my yarn. 3, I turn my work around again, my yarn and back, and I slip the stitches over. The 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th over, and I do 2 bind offs. And then I have 1 more to do. And then when I get to the end, I just do my last 2 regular bind offs, and I cut my working yarn and thread it through this last stitch. And there we go, we have a very cute, simple picot edge. So the last bind off I'm going to show you is a sewn bind off, and for that you need a length of yarn that's 3 times the length you need to cover and a tapestry needle. So I'm just going to get that ready. And then the one I'm choosing to show you is a fairly simple bind off, and it's still elastic, and it's an interesting thing to know. So you're going to come in with your tapestry needle purlwise into the first 2 stitches and pull your yarn through, and then you're going to come into that first stitch knitwise and take it off the needle and pull your yarn through. Then you go into the first 2, even though you've already been through this one, it's okay, you go in through the first 2 purlwise, pull your yarn through, and then come back to that first stitch, knitwise, take it off and pull your yarn through. And you're going to do that all the way across. Purl through 2, pull the yarn through, knit through 1, take it off, and pull the yarn through all the way to the end. Now keep in mind that when you're doing this, if I pull my working yarn really tight here, it's going to be less elastic and have less flexibility. If I pull it less tight, it's going to give me more elasticity and flexibility. So it's good to pull because you don't want it super loose, but you don't want it super tight either. And the last stitch, you just go into it purlwise and you can weave in your ends, and there you go. Okay, so here are my 5 bind offs all done, and I just want to do a quick comparison to see which one might be more elastic and interesting to have for a sock. I personally like the picot. It's got a nice decorative edge to it, and I like the Jenny's very stretchy bind off too. It's nice and solid. But let's see. So the first one that I did was the elastic bind off. And this one, if I pull it nice and tight over 10 stitches, it gives me about 3 inches. So it's nice. It gives quite a bit, and it's got a nice look to it. Not complicated, simple. The next one is the Jenny Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off. Again, I like the look of it. It looks like it's a solid finish. And this one too gives me 3 inches. So it's about the same loosey-goosiness. Then the icord. I like the icord a lot for shawls, but I'm not sure I'm loving it for socks. It only gives me about 2 inches, so it's not as stretchy as the first 2 bind-offs that we have here. Then we have the picot, which I like. It's nice, decorative. It gives you a little something. And this one, it's just a little over 3. It has a lot more give. So it really is very elasticy. I think the only difference between the picot edge and maybe the Jenny Surprising is that this one seems to respect the rib I have here, whereas the picot, I think, might eventually just fan out from where, I'm not sure. And then the sewn bind off has a little under 3, so it's tighter than the picot in the first 2, but looser than the icord. I hope this was useful. Thank you.